Hello everybody, my name is Michael Curran and I am a University of Florida Education Science major, and today I'm going to walk you through how I created both my timeline and poster on the history and scope of distance education. And I'm also going to highlight some of the key areas of both topics that I thought were important, impactful, or relevant. Now, the text talks about how people usually associate distance learning with the internet. To be completely honest, I did too. That's the first thing that came to my mind. But as we have all learned in these last couple chapters, distance learning has a very rich history that goes all the way back to the 1980s. So the first thing I want to share with you is my distance education timeline. I'm going to show you this here. I used a program called Satori to create this timeline. I found it very easy to use. Has a lot of different ways that you can present your information. I'm going to keep it in this view so you can kind of see via the timeline as we progress down through the ages. But there's other ways you can view this, like a slide by slide. It actually takes the timeline bullets and makes slides of it, and you can convert it to a PDF poster as well. So to start off, I want to talk about correspondence study, which high level is printed materials that started back in the 1800s that were sent through the US mail. This became an option for more people because with the evolution of the railroads, the US Postal Service became more affordable. So more and more people were really taking advantage of this way to learn, as opposed to having to go to any type of institution. So as I scroll down, there's a lot of things I kind of highlighted which I thought were important or relevant in this time period. But I really want to talk about this one right here. Anna Elliott Tickner, and she found the Society to Encourage Studies for Home. The reason why I'm highlighting this is as I learned about distance education and reflected on it, I became pretty cognizant that a lot of these technologies and different types of learning options were created to promote more of an equity in education. And this is really what she was promoting, and specifically in her case, more options for women to access education, which in that time was an underserved population. And I think as we look at all these other different options, we'll see that to be more and more of a trend. I'm trying to make education more accessible, and that's where distance education really shined. Also in this time period, I did include a brief video on the brief history of distance education that I found on YouTube, and it actually talked about some of the things that we learned in the text. Moving on down to broadcasting, high level again, this is just having educational programs broadcasted through the television and the radio. This really started in about 1934. That's a pretty important date for this particular type of learning. And the bullet point that I wanted to talk about actually is down towards the bottom. In 1972, the FCC actually required all cable television operators to devote a channel to specifically isolate educational programming and learning opportunities for that. And by the mid-1980s, there were over 200 plus college courses that were being offered over the television. As we continue to move on through the timeline, in the late 1960s and early 1970s, we start to examine a phenomenon called open universities. The US had kind of like an experimental version of this, but really the one that is the most prevalent in our text and in our readings is the United Kingdom's Open University. And the term open, as we've learned about in these last couple modules, is really political in that region because not everybody had access to higher education. And through this type of distance learning programs, more and more people were able to actually get education through this method. It's much less expensive than a normal college experience. I think the statistics were 40% less than a typical brick and mortar school. And the reason why I'm highlighting this one is this is really the first time that education was looked at like a system, as we learned in the first module, where between the government and the instructional designers who put these materials together and all of these different entities were really working together to create high quality types of education that were affordable through economies of scale. And because these were so successful, this became a model for other countries as well. So I thought that was pretty important to call that out. As we move on down, the next one is teleconferencing, which started in the 1980s. One of the highlights I want to call into this one is business TV. That actually was in the 1980s through the 1990s. This business TV is important to me because I've been in the corporate training and development area for the last 10 years of my career. So anything that has to do with like corporate training and development and learning new skills for the job and the transfer of those skills for the job is really interesting to me. So this is when distance learning and distance education kind of went beyond just school and academia into the corporate space. So I thought that was pretty important. And then the last one I want to talk about is probably the most obvious, is the internet. And this revolutionized distance learning. Through this vast economies of scale, it made many programs affordable and accessible to multiple different groups of learners. It can use any media. And on my timeline, I called out that at the time of the text, they said that in the year 2000, web pages reached over 5 billion compared to 50 pages in 1992. That just shows you just the degree of growth. And even today, that number is probably dwarfed. So it is by far the most expansive type of distance learning and one that is not going to go away. And finally, I want to just take the last couple minutes or so of this presentation to go over my poster. I created my poster using Canva. I find that program to be pretty easy to use. I'll make this a little bit bigger. So with Canva, what I did is I kind of took the 4 main types of categories of distance learning in the text, and I put some important bullets under each one. So I talked about who would be the intended audience for this type of distance learning, and there's a table in the back of the book that really helped me kind of put this together. I talked about the impact and the presence of all of these different types, the quality that you can expect from these different types of distance learning that are out there today, and the benefits of each one. So I encourage all of you to go into my profile if you're interested to see more, and it is there for you. But thank you everybody for allowing me to share a little bit about my project. I'm looking forward to working with all of you more this semester.